Hi, this is Chris Walker. Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to fit a normal-sized TV into a studio apartment? It's a disaster, right? You measure the wall, you think you've got space for that 55-inch beauty, but the second you unbox it, it just eats the room. It's like living in a Best Buy aisle. So you panic, you return it, and then you make the mistake, the big mistake. You downgrade to one of those cheap 32-inch bedroom TVs that somehow still cost $200 but look like you're watching Netflix through a screen door. It drives me crazy because the industry knows this. They know millions of us are living in tight spaces, dorms, or home offices where we need one screen to do everything. Gaming, movies, work, second monitor duty, all of it. But instead of giving us quality, they usually just give us leftovers. Old tech wrapped in new plastic. But not this year. We finally found a few screens that actually respect your square footage and your retinas. Listen, we buy these panels with our own budget. No sponsors, no brand partners telling me what I can't say. That's the only way we can tell you which of these are actually worth the money and which ones are just landfill waiting to happen. So if you want to keep this channel honest and brand skeptical, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button and maybe subscribe if you're new. It genuinely helps us keep the lights on and the testing data flowing. All right, let's fix your living room. You know, for the last 10 years, if you walked into a store and asked for a TV under 50 inches, the sales guy would look at you like you just asked to buy a cassette tape. The industry basically decided that if you have a small apartment, you must also hate good picture quality. They treated the 43-inch bracket as a dumping ground for leftover parts, panels with terrible viewing angles, processors that struggle to open YouTube in under 30 seconds, and HDR that was darker than the SDR signal. It was insulting. But then the work from home shift happened, and suddenly millions of people realized their monitors were too small for movies and their TVs were too big for their desks. The lines blurred. And that brings us to the first heavyweight contender.
This is the LG C5, specifically the 42-inch model. And look, I'm going to start with the price because I can hear you wincing already. It's hovering around $1,300 for a 42-inch screen. I know, that sounds insane when you can grab a cheap 55-inch TCL for a quarter of that price, but you have to stop thinking of this as just a TV. In a small apartment, every square foot costs you rent money. Furniture has to pull double duty. Your dining table is your desk. Your couch is your guest bed. And this screen is trying to be the only display you own. The reason this thing dominates the conversation isn't just because it's an OLED with perfect blacks. Though, yeah, watching Dune on this in a dark room is basically a religious experience compared to a standard LED. It's because LG finally fixed the monitor stuff. See, for years, using a TV as a monitor was a nightmare. Text looked weirdly fringy because of the pixel layout, the input lag made your mouse feel like it was moving through molasses, and you had to worry about burn-in if you left a window open too long. With the C5, they've pushed the brightness algorithms to be smarter about static content. The text clarity is crispy enough that I've written entire scripts on it without getting a headache. And the gaming specs? It's running 144 Hz refresh rate with 4 HDMI 2.1 ports. That means you can plug in your PS5, your Xbox, your PC, and a streaming stick, and not one of them is being throttled. But, and there is always a but with OLEDs, you need to know what you're signing up for. This is a lifestyle change product. First off, the stand. The feet on the 42-inch model are weirdly wide. If you have a narrow console or a shallow desk, you might find them slipping off the edges. You'll probably want to VESA mount it, which adds another $50 to the cost. Second, the automatic brightness limiter. It's a safety feature to prevent burn-in, right? But sometimes when you're just reading a white web page for 5 minutes, the TV thinks nothing is happening and slowly dims the screen until it looks like you're working in a cave. You wiggle the mouse and bam, it brightens up again. It's jarring. It's the TV trying to protect itself, but it feels like it's nagging you. And let's be real about the magic remote. It's great for Netflix, but trying to use that Wiimote-style pointer to close a pop-up window sitting 2 feet away, it's an exercise in frustration.
However, if you are the type of person who lives in a studio and your living room is basically your desk and a chair, this is the end game. It deletes the need for a separate monitor. It saves space. And frankly, once you go OLED, it's really hard to go back to anything else. The contrast creates this depth that makes 3D games look, well, actually 3D. Before we move on to the next one, and trust me, the next one is a completely different philosophy, I need to ask you guys something. The industry is pivoting hard right now. We're seeing more of these lifestyle screens, matte displays, battery-powered TVs. It's getting weird. So drop a comment below. What exactly are you hunting for? Are you looking for a pure gaming beast, or do you just want something that doesn't look ugly when it's turned off? Tell me specifically what models or problems you want me to tackle in the next deep dive. I read those comments and they literally dictate what we buy next. Okay, let's talk about the exact opposite of the OLED. Let's say you don't care about refresh rates. Let's say you don't own an Xbox. Let's say your biggest problem isn't black levels, but the fact that your apartment has massive south-facing windows and your current TV acts like a black mirror that reflects your entire kitchen. Enter Samsung's The Frame. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with this TV. I mostly hate how much I like it. From a pure videophile standpoint, if you look at the specs on paper, it's overpriced. You are paying a pretty tax, a heavy one. For the price of this 43-inch frame, you could buy a high-performance mini LED that technically has better brightness and contrast. But none of those TVs can do this. The matte display on this thing is witchcraft. I'm serious. If you live in a bright room where you can't control the light, maybe you don't have blackout curtains, or maybe you just like the sun, this is the only TV that remains watchable at high noon. The anti-glare coating scatters reflections so well that it actually looks like paper, and that's the point. When you turn it off, it doesn't go black, it displays art, and because of that matte finish, your brain, it gets tricked. You glance at it and you don't register screen, you register framed print. In a 400 square foot apartment, where the TV is usually the dominant black void in the room, that camouflage is valuable. It makes the room feel bigger, less cluttered with tech.
The other trick is the One Connect box. Instead of plugging 4 chunky HDMI cables into the back of the TV, which pushes it away from the wall, you plug one tiny, almost invisible fiber cable into the screen. That cable runs down to a separate box that houses all the brains and ports. You hide that box in a cabinet or under the couch. This allows the TV to mount completely flush against the wall, like a picture frame. If you hate cable clutter, this feature alone might sell you. But here is the truth bomb I warned you about. You're trading performance for aesthetics. In a dark room, the frame struggles. It's an edge-lit LED panel, not an OLED or full-array local dimming set. That means the blacks aren't black. They're a dark, milky gray. If you're a horror movie fan, you're going to be annoyed by the clouding in the corners. And then there's the software. Samsung's Tizen OS, look, it's gotten better, but on these mid-range processors, it can feel sluggish. Navigating the art store, which, by the way, they want a monthly subscription for if you want the good art, can feel like wading through mud. So if you're the design dweller, if you care more about how your apartment looks than how perfectly accurate the explosion in a Marvel movie is, this is the winner. It vanishes when you don't need it. But if you care about picture quality first, you're paying for a paint job. Okay, so we've covered the premium hybrid that costs as much as a used car and the interior designer's dream that costs a premium for looks. But what if you're just normal? What if you're renting a place for a year, you're on a budget, and you just want a TV that turns on, plays Netflix, and doesn't look like garbage? What if you have $300, not $1,300? This is the part of the market where things get dangerous, because there are so many bad TVs in the budget aisle. Brands like Element, Westinghouse, even low-end Samsungs, they flood this zone with e-waste. But there is one outlier, one brand that seems to be fighting a price war with itself, and we, the consumers, are actually winning. I'm talking about the TCL S-Class, specifically the 5 series, or whatever confusing name they've given it this month. Amazon listings change like the wind. Check the link below for the specific model number I'm talking about so you don't buy the wrong year. This TV is the definition of punching above its weight. Here's the reality check. It's plasticky. The remote feels like a dog chew toy. The feet are wobbly. But turn it on and you get
Google TV. And unlike the sluggish Samsung interface, Google TV on these newer TCLs is actually snappy. It organizes your content well, the voice search works, and it has every app you need. The picture, it's fine. And I mean that as a compliment. It gets bright enough to fight a standard overhead light. The colors are accurate enough out of the box that skin tones don't look like lobsters. For 99% of people watching The Office or streaming YouTube, this is all the TV you need. It doesn't have the inky blacks of the OLED, and it doesn't have the matte finish of the frame. But it leaves you with an extra $1,000 in your bank account. And in a small apartment, maybe that money is better spent on, a better mattress or rent. The catch here is longevity and quality control. We see more dead pixel reports with these budget panels than the high-end stuff. It's a bit of a lottery. And if you're a gamer, you're capped at 60 Hz on most of these budget models. You won't get that buttery smooth 120 frames per second that the PS5 is capable of. But if you're just casual, if you just play FIFA or Fortnite occasionally, it's perfectly playable. The input lag has come way down on these budget sets. So we have the perfectionist, the decorator, and the pragmatist, but there's one more category we need to talk about. The cinema snob. The person who doesn't care about gaming, doesn't care about art mode, but wants the absolute best motion and color accuracy for movies, and refuses to buy a soundbar because there's no space. This is where Sony steps into the ring, and things get complicated. Sony operates on a different philosophy. They don't chase the highest brightness numbers or the lowest input lag. They chase creator intent. And on a small 42-inch screen, their approach to audio is something no one else is doing.
This is the Sony A90K. And if you are the type of person who pauses movies to point out motion artifacts to your annoyed friends, this is the one you buy. Sony does something weird here. They know that in a small apartment, you probably don't have room for a soundbar. You definitely don't have room for a surround sound system. So they turned the screen itself into a speaker. They call it acoustic surface audio. There are actuators behind the glass that vibrate the panel to create sound. I know, it sounds like a gimmick, but it's not, because the sound is coming directly from the actors' mouths, not from down-firing speakers bouncing off your table. It locks the dialogue to the image in a way that feels incredibly high-end. Is it as loud as a dedicated soundbar? No. But is it the best built-in audio you can get in a 42-inch size? Absolutely. The other reason you buy this is the processing. Sony's XR processor handles motion better than anyone else. If you watch a lot of 24 frames per second movies, this TV respects the film grain and the pacing better than the LG or the Samsung. It doesn't give you that soap opera effect unless you ask it to. But you pay the Sony tax. This TV is usually $100 more than the LG C5, and it's not as bright. If you're a gamer, the LG is slightly better because it supports 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, whereas the Sony only has 2, and one of them is the eARC port, which is annoying. Alright, let's zoom out. We've looked at the big 3 contenders, but before I give you the final verdict, I need to warn you about the 3 things that will annoy you no matter which one you pick. I call these the small TV compromises. First, the soundbar trap. Unless you buy that Sony, the audio on 42-inch TVs is physically limited by physics. The drivers are tiny. If you buy the LG or the TCL, budget for at least a small Bluetooth speaker or a pair of headphones. Do not expect theater sound from a chassis that's thinner than your phone. Second, the neck breaker effect. If you plan to put a 42-inch TV on your desk as a monitor, measure the height seriously. Most desks are too high for a screen this tall. You will end up looking up at the top toolbar, and after 3 hours, your neck will scream at you. You might need a floor stand that sits behind your desk to get it low enough. Third, the smart OS wars. The TCL has Google TV, which is great. The Sony has Google TV, but it's slower. The LG has WebOS, which is okay, but full of ads. The Samsung has Tizen, which is a bloated mess. My advice, don't choose the TV based on the OS. You're going to plug in an Apple TV or a Fire Stick eventually anyway. Buy the panel, not the menu.
So, which one deserves your hard-earned rent money?
Here is the breakdown. If you have the budget and you want one screen to do it all, buy the LG 42-inch C5. It's the Swiss Army knife of displays. It's the best gaming monitor, a fantastic movie TV, and it holds its resale value better than anything else. It is the safe bet for 90% of people. If you live in a glass box filled with sunlight or you hate the tech look, buy the Samsung Frame 43-inch. It's the only TV that won't fight the sun. It looks beautiful when it's off. Just understand that you are paying for the matte finish and the art mode, not for home theater performance. If you are a movie purist who hates soundbars, buy the Sony A90K. It's the most cinematic experience in a small package. The sound is magical, the motion is perfect. It's a luxury product for a small space. If you are sane and just want to watch Netflix without going broke, buy the TCL S-Class 5 series. It is 25% of the price of the others, and it gives you 80% of the experience. It is the smart financial decision. One final truth bomb before you go. Please, for the love of everything holy, do not let a salesperson talk you into buying a 32-inch 1080p TV in 2026. Unless you physically cannot fit a 42-inch screen, those 32-inch models are e-waste. They are using 10-year-old technology. Step up to the 40-inch class. The jump in quality is massive. I've dropped links to the specific model numbers we tested below. These are affiliate links, so if you buy through them, it buys me a coffee. But more importantly, they go to the current versions, not the old stock some sellers try to offload. Don't forget to comment what you want me to review next. I'm Chris Walker, and I'll see you in the next one.